This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Hello, I'm Phil McKinney, and welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where we're all about helping you go from idea to launching your innovation. Now, we've been saying that tagline as part of the show since we started the show back in July and the podcast since 2005. And we really do mean it. Part of the mission behind this show is really to help you, the listener, take your ideas and really transform those into game-changing innovations, whichever direction they may take. Now, this week, the show is going to be a little bit different. There's no guest this week, as you know, as from the standpoint of having guests come in and kind of share their story about what it is that they do. In this case, we're going to actually do it from the standpoint of answering questions from you, the listeners. Now, a number of you have been sending me questions over the last 5 months, and many of you have been listeners of the podcast for quite some time before we syndicated it to the radio show. So I have not pre-canned any answers. These are just a random list of questions. I actually had somebody go back through all of the emails over the last 5 months and pull together all the questions that we've gotten asked. And I'm just going to randomly go through these today. Now, going forward, we're going to do this on a periodic basis. We tend to get a pretty strong feedback from you that you like this. It's an opportunity for you to ask questions that are really kind of sitting on top of mind for you, whether you're an entrepreneur thinking about starting a business, or whether you're an innovator trying to do innovations inside of medium and large organizations. This is your chance to ask the questions that I'll just do my best shot at answering them. Hey, and if I don't know the answer, I'm going to tell you I don't know the answer. Now, I will tell you, I'm scanning this list. We go across a pretty wide range of topics, everything from the more common ones about ideas and innovating inside large organizations, etc., to some pretty specific questions around Hewlett Packard and my experience at HP and what HP is going through right now. Yes, there actually is a question on Carly Fiorina. I will answer that question. We'll now pull that off till later on. We'll get through some of the more what I would call meaty topics up here up front. So I'm just going to go through these in order. Well, not really in order. I'm going to group them, I guess, just to kind of bring some semblance of organization here to answering the question. So the first question I'm going to answer comes from a longtime listener. And the question is what is the biggest mistakes companies make when starting an innovation effort? So this is probably the one question I get. In many cases, I get this question from internal innovators who are trying to see if their company is making those mistakes. So the one point here is when you say starting an innovation effort, I'm not quite sure what the person means by effort. I'm going to assume it means the company's getting around to maybe forming an innovation team, and they're going to start putting some more efforts behind it. The key here is there's two things that tend to trip most organizations out when they're trying to do these innovation efforts or starting something new, and it's time and money. Are they going to commit enough resources in the form of money? Is it a meaningful amount of money, and is it enough money over an extended period of time? And the other is time in the form of resources. Is the CEO going to spend enough time at this? Is the management team going to spend enough time on this? And do they allocate not the B string, but the A string players to whatever the innovation effort's on? And so the biggest mistake I get is people, organizations, CEOs want to stand up, thump their chest and say, woo, we're going to go up and do these great innovation efforts. But then behind the scenes, they really don't put the resources in the form of time and money. Now, this kind of leads into this whole, the questions that I've gotten also, and there's one on here on the list around the 7 laws. So back in, I'm going to say it was September-ish, I'm going to go, I don't have the exact date, of 2011. I had actually taken a medical leave of absence from Hewlett Packard. A bunch of things happened at HP, and I'll share those maybe as part of the answer to this question. But I had grown frustrated on what are the most common mistakes corporations make from the standpoint of what are all the elements you have to have in place in order to be very, very successful in your innovation efforts. And I wrote a blog post called The 7 Laws of Innovation. Now, I just wrote this as kind of almost personal therapy, and this thing has just taken off like a rocket. Now, some of the laws are things like law of leadership. Does the senior executive really committed? The law of resources in the form of money and time. The law of patience. Do you have enough patience? The law of execution. Sitting around talking about it and doing a bunch of brainstorming sessions is of zero value. You got to get out there and you actually got to go do it. So I wrote this 7 laws of innovation. And that kind of feeds both into answering this question of the biggest mistakes and then the question about how the 7 laws came about. So let me answer that question. So how did the 7 laws come about? As I said, I wrote it out of frustration, but you have to back up to the summer of 2011 and what was going on. I'd actually had planned for some minor surgery, and so I was planning to take some time off for that and also take a little bit of a personal sabbatical. I had been through 2 CEOs. I was in my 3rd CEO at HP. And typically nothing ever happens in the summertime. So I actually took some time off. And lo and behold, while I was out on the medical sabbatical, you'll recall that that's when Hewlett-Packard announced that they were going to acquire Autonomy. They were going to shut down all of the work on the Palm phones and the Palm effort in mobile platforms. And then also they were going to spin out the PC division. And actually, I wasn't even there. I wasn't included in any of those discussions. So through a series of activities over a pretty short period of time of a few days, I sat down and pinned this blog post called The 7 Laws of Innovation. Interestingly enough, a reporter who I know pretty well over at Fast Company picked up that article and wrote its own article with the headline of did HP violate the 7 laws of innovation? And that was kind of the tipping point for me to make the decision to retire out of HP through a process of that current CEO being removed, Meg Whitman coming in as the new CEO. I agreed to stay through the end of the year. But interestingly enough, those 7 laws have been adopted pretty broadly. There's actually posters that are available over at the store at innovation.tools. You can buy those. 100% of the proceeds for the posters get donated to hackingautism.org, one of the nonprofits that I am very involved in, helping those on the autism spectrum be able to have a long, meaningful lives and careers. So we created these posters. A lot of companies or a lot of employees buy these posters, stick them up on their cube walls. In some cases, I think, to actually annoy their bosses. So that's how the 7 laws came about, and it kind of ties into the most common mistakes. And the 7 laws were really this collection of my frustration as a CTO, as a head of an innovation for a large multinational company, even a company that's heavily focused on innovation, where they got it wrong, where we got it wrong, and I can't put the blame on somebody else. As the CTO, part of this rests with me. And that's probably one of my bigger frustrations from the standpoint of I look back on my own career in the innovation game of how hard do you fight and do you really take it to the mat? And so that answers that question. Biggest mistakes companies make. Go check out the 7 laws. Actually, I'll link to the 7 laws in the show notes so that you can go over there and find that. And again, if you want to buy the poster, it's over at innovation.tools. You can buy that. And again, 100% of the proceeds from all the poster sales goes to hackingautism.org. Let's see if we got another really kind of a quick question here. How did I get into doing the podcasting? Actually, that's probably not a quick question, but I'll start it off and we'll pick it up after the commercial break. This show's been going on for 11 years. March 22nd, 2005 was the very first episode of Killer Innovations, recorded in the bathroom of the Marriott Hotel in Phoenix, Arizona. It's amazing I can remember that fact. But it was really started as a way to pay back my early mentor, Bob Davis. Later in my career, I asked him how I could pay it back given all the investment and time he made in my career, and he laughed and said, "You can't pay it back. You have to pay it forward." Thus, that's how the podcast came about. We've been doing it 11 years. It'll be 12 years this coming March 22nd. We always do a big anniversary show each year when we do the show. And I remind people that I was doing podcasting before there was iTunes. So we'll pick this up some more after the commercial break. I've got some more questions, including the question that I get most common these days ever since the election here in the United States, and that is my opinion on Carly Fiorina. So I'll answer that. Stay tuned. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll answer some more of your questions, and then as usual, we will have a killer question in the last segment of the show, so stay right there. I'm Phil McKinney. You're listening to Killer Innovations.
Biz Talk Radio.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Hello, I'm Phil McKinney, and welcome back to Killer Innovations. We are taking a little bit of a sidestep to our normal format of having leading innovators on the show, and instead fielding questions from you, the audience. So these are questions that you sent in. Somebody else on the team has compiled them all up and handed them to me, so there are no pre-canned answers. I am truly trying to answer these on the fly. I did cheat, though, during the commercial break. I did read ahead to get my heads and thoughts about some of the questions that are being answered. Some of them are actually pretty interesting. So first off, let me pick up a question that I thought was really interesting that was in the list here is what is your biggest innovation failure? And then what is your biggest innovation success? If you've been a long time listener to the show, you know that I'm a big believer in we have to just face up to that we're going to fail. We're going to try things. We're going to try to make them work. They just don't work. And therefore, you learn from them, though, and then you pick up and you go forward. At the same time, though, you also have the opportunity that if you fail enough and you can keep trying, that you eventually will have a big success. So I'm going to start off with what is my biggest innovation failure. One is I've gone back through, I've been spending probably the last 5 or 6 months going back through my idea notebooks. And probably the biggest shocking thing was the things that I'd written down in my notebooks that I had flagged as really important ideas. I just never executed on them. So I think one of my biggest failures is, and I suffer from this just like everybody else does, is you got lots of ideas, you can stack them all up, you can write them in your idea notebooks, but they're of zero value unless you execute them. And I think the more specifically an example of a failure that probably haunts me more than anything else is the failure of the Palm acquisition at Hewlett-Packard. Combining HP's hardware power with the Palm operating system, WebOS, I thought that was going to be just an absolute breakthrough, new kind of mobile platform experience. Prior to the Palm, there was actually a hardware platform, a tablet product that was being worked on at HP. We were actually working with a certain very large magazine producer, publisher, and we were creating one of the very first, really what I would call rich digital magazines. It's a magazine, if you're in the tech world, you know it by name. We were working very hard with them, but the leadership at HP killed that product. That magazine, subsequently, we signed over our work on it to the magazine publisher, and they actually released that on the iPad, and it was one of the big early wins in magazine publishing and on the iPad. And in this case, then we went back and we did the Palm acquisition, and it was probably my biggest frustration that we couldn't make that work. Not completely underneath my control, but one that I had high hopes and ones that I was probably the most frustrated on. What was the biggest innovation success? Well, one is I think this podcast is an innovation success. As I shared before the commercial break, I started this March 22nd of 2005. The podcast started off even before iTunes even existed. Podcasting was extremely small. There was only a handful of us that were doing regular shows. And in fact, the first year of the show, 52 weeks, we put 50 shows out for the Killer Innovations. And that kind of established the footprint for for Killer Innovations. And the show's kind of waned on being on a regular schedule or being periodic. One of my motivations as to why we're syndicating this on radio now is, one, I got approached to do this. But two, it's also to force the discipline of putting out the show each and every week. I think it's that form of just being consistent and delivering you what I hope that you find is great content, some things that you would find useful. That's really the motivation for this. But having to do being on the radio live every Sunday at a specific time and then producing the podcast afterwards, that discipline I find helps me. I'm a big believer in using time boxing. So one way that I innovate is I kind of commit myself to something, commit myself to a schedule, and have to deliver. In this case of the podcast, I've committed to the weekly schedule of the radio show, and that's forcing me to continue to work at and deliver this podcast. And we're constantly experimenting with new things. And in fact, this week, we're just finalizing the design for the new studio. That will come together sometime in the beginning part of next year. And then we'll be in a position to actually be able to produce more content, hopefully continuing to improve the audio quality, and then eventually be able to make video of the podcast, being made that available too. So the other, probably the biggest innovation success was really the transformation of Hewlett-Packard's Personal Systems Group, the PC division. When I took over in my CTO role, that division was losing $1 billion, and it was number 3, number 4 in the market. Through a lot of teamwork, some great people, great support, we took it from losing $1 billion, being number 3, number 4 in market share, to taking it to number 1 market share and making $4.5 billion in profit. So you're talking about a $5.5 billion swing. And products that went on to win Best Product Design Products, three years running, being named to Fast Company's 50 Most Creative Companies, and specifically around those products like Blackbird and etc. But again, I take that as probably the biggest innovation success, but I played a small part. The team that rallied around the innovation efforts in that group, including all the product teams, they deserve the bulk of the credit, but it's one that I really take a whole lot of pride in. And that team, a lot of that team is still there doing great work at Hewlett-Packard. So that, I think, kind of addresses both the biggest failures and the biggest successes. For me, from the standpoint of the successes, yeah, they're great. You get little awards. I've got plaques and posters on my office here about the products that turn out to win and be quite successful. But for me, it's also about taking those risks and trying things that are not going to work out. Like this radio show. This was a pure roll of the dice. You know, could I do a weekly show with live guests doing interviews? And I'm going to leave that voting up to you as to whether or not you think I'm doing a good job, or if you've got suggestions on how to improve it, drop me a note. But it's about taking these risks and not being afraid that you're going to trip, fall, land flat on your face, and therefore you got to pick yourself up. Part of that is by trying these things out and tripping and failing and trying it again, you learn. But if you stay doing the same thing you've done all the time, I've just found that once you've achieved a major success in an area, sometimes you just got to pick up and go in a completely different area. That's where you're going to find that next success. It's not doing better than what you did 2 years ago or just a slightly better product you did 5 years ago. You got to go in a completely new area. That's where innovators really find their way through the whole process. So stay tuned. We're going to answer some questions specifically around the Hewlett-Packard split. And the most common question I get these days is on what I think of Carly and her running for president. So stay right there. We're going to be right back after this short commercial break. I'm Phil McKinney, and you're listening to Killer Innovations.
Biz Talk Radio.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We're picking up where we left off. I'm answering a series of questions that you all submitted via email. One of the questions I commonly get is about where's the best way to find resources and tools, etc. Well, one is obviously Google search and a number of sites. There's a couple of things I'm going to announce today that hopefully you'll find useful. One is I don't know, it's probably 3 years ago, I put together a 2-hour audio course. It was released on CD, yes, back when CDs were still probably 5 or 6 years ago now. It's still available up on Amazon. You can go search for it. Just search for Phil McKinney. At Amazon, I think the publisher's selling it for like $20 or something like that now on Amazon. Today, though, I'm going to give it away for free. All the listeners for the show, radio show, for the podcast, you can get it for free. So the way to get it for free is just text me the word innovate to 33444. Or you can go to killerinnovations.com/innovate, type in your email address. You'll get an email back with all the links to download the audio files, the artwork, everything that's up on Amazon for $20. And again, 100% of the proceeds for that go to hackingautism.org. We donate, my wife and I, we donate all of the author royalties from the book, any revenue that comes in from any of the Amazon sales like this, or the posters or anything like that, all get donated to the charities that we're involved in. So the two questions now that I get most often these days is related again to my years at Hewlett-Packard. I was there for 10 years, retiring in December of 11, or at least I thought I was retiring. But most recently, with the election underway, a number of people asked for my opinion of Carly, and then also the opinion of HP splitting into two. So I'm going to take the HP splitting into two first, and then I'll answer the Carly question. So the question is what is your opinion of HP's split? So November 1, Hewlett-Packard split into two separate companies. Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, which is the commercial large platform business, and then HP Inc., which is the old PCs, printers, laptops, displays, that kind of stuff. And the question I get is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? And quite honestly, I think it's actually a great thing. If you look back in Hewlett-Packard's history, it's the only Fortune 25 company that has actually gone through 5 fundamental transformations of its business. Not just little tweaks and does something a little different. 5 fundamental transformations. Bill Hewlett and David Packard set a phenomenal foundation. It's a great company, great people. But it's that ability to look and say, we need to totally transform our business. When it went from being the test and measurement to computers, when it went into computers, Bill and Dave both did not believe that was going to be the path to success. He got convinced. However, he also made the prediction that HP would be the number one computer manufacturer in 25 years. Interestingly enough, it became number one in year 23. So that's what I would call patience and perseverance, sticking with it. So HP, when you look back in the history, when they've made these transformations, they burn the boat. They cut everything back. They focus on one thing. They commit the resources. They know it's a bet the business bet. That's what HP needs to do in both areas, both in the consumer products and the commercial products, personal devices, enterprise servers, software, etc. The splitting of the company, I personally think, is actually a great thing. The next question I get most common, and I get this literally every day. I get it from reporters. I get it from leaders whenever I'm out and about. It's the most common question I get from the audiences when I'm giving my speeches, is what is my opinion of Carly and Carly running for president? Now, a little bit of history here. I was not at HP when Carly joined. I came in after Carly joined. I had retired, my first retirement out of Telligent. We had grown that business. I cashed out, was taking some time off, and HP actually contacted me to come in and help HP out, help Carly and the team out post the merger or acquisition of Compaq. So I came in that time frame. So that's my perspective. You just have to know that. I knew Carly through Alex Mandel, who is my boss at Telligent. Alex is the former president of AT&T, and Carly actually reported directly to Alex. So I came in having that perspective, having Carly work for Alex. I worked for Alex. I was asked to come in. I agreed to go to HP for 1 year, so just to help out post the Compaq merger, specifically in some key troubling areas. So I came in to do that work, ended up staying for 10. And now I honestly have to say, I've always been impressed with Carly. I've been in meetings with her and have seen her up close and personal in her dealings. And I think, she's incredibly smart. She's incredibly charismatic. I think keep in mind that she was the first woman to run a Fortune 25 company back when she took over as CEO at Hewlett Packard. So all in all, I actually like her. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to vote for her because I think there's still a lot of other really good, strong candidates. But I do think that some of the criticism with regards to the Compaq merger and with the firing of employees, there's been CEOs at HP that have actually fired many more employees than what Carly did. And if you look at USA Today, did an analysis of Carly compared to all the other CEOs with regards to their financial performance, and Carly was not the worst from the standpoint of if you take into account the economic downturn and what other companies' performance numbers look like. So I think some of the use of the HP experience is either for or against needs a little bit more balance. But all in all, I think people have seen her in the debate. People seem to be intrigued by her. She seems to be, a lot of people want to know what is she really like in person. Like I said, I've always been impressed with her. I always got along with her very well. I thought that, or I do think that she is incredibly astute, very fast learner, very charismatic, great visionary, great strategist. So there you have it. Now maybe I can just take this audio and just distribute it to everybody, and I can stop getting questions literally every day from press and reporters. The next question I get asked, or I've been getting asked about most recently, is about a series of articles that I've been writing. They've been appearing over in Pulse on LinkedIn, along with Medium, and I've been posting them on my blog around American innovation. I'm a big skeptic on where we're heading on the U.S.'s ability to contain and grow its leadership in the innovation space. Really tied to two areas. One is education, and two is government support for the innovation efforts. So on the education side, you've heard it before. I've been a big, huge critic for years. I've got an entire chapter on my book outlining some of the work that I was doing with the U.S. Department of Education to try to innovate K-12 education. My view is for years we've been producing the world's greatest test takers. Now, surprisingly enough here, 2 weeks ago, President Obama actually put forward a new program to actually reduce the dependency on test taking. And he did that, and if you read the article and that on it, it's actually quite interesting because he points out that this has not achieved the results, and he recognizes that we've focused so much on the test. So that's actually the good thing. With regards to the government, if you look at government support of programs like DARPA or SBIR, Small Business Innovation Funds, those types of things, they've been decreasing at such a rate. And the tax structure actually encourages companies to do less long-term R&D and focus more on applied research, which is the near term. So we're leaving long-range, long R&D to other players, and other countries are stepping in the innovation. You look at it from patents being issued in China, Japan, even India now. The number of patents being awarded is starting to really put the pressure on the United States. So that's my view. I think if you want to continue to see, or if you want to receive the series of articles that I've been writing, you can go over to philmckinney.com. You can sign up for the newsletter there, and you'll get them each week as I post them. So We're going to wrap this up. If you've got questions that you would like answered, just drop them to me at phil@killerinnovations.com. I'll put together those answers, get those back to you, and save some of those up for the ones that are most common and use them in an upcoming show. So hopefully you found this useful. Again, just trying to address the most common questions that I get because I'm sure everybody else has them. So stay right there where you're at. We're going to take this quick commercial break. When we come back, we've got a just absolute great killer question this week, one that's kind of a little bit of a twist. So stay right where you're at. We'll be back. This is Phil McKinney on Killer Innovations on the Biz Talk Radio Network.
The opinions you hear on Biz Talk Radio are those of the hosts, callers, and guests, and do not necessarily reflect those of this station, Biz Talk Radio, its management, or advertisers. The information on Biz Talk Radio does not constitute a recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any product or service. If you have any questions about Biz Talk Radio, contact us at 817-274-1609 or at biztalkradio.com.